This is Jason J. Rock Houston, and you're listening to This Is Metal with Joe Lawson. Welcome to the show once again, Joe. And we're talking tonight, being that it's December 8th. If you can believe, it's the 16th anniversary of Dimebag Darrell's death, or murder, I guess, to be more specific. And I guess, to start the show off, Joe, do you want to share with us, what's the story of how, you first became a Pantera fan?
Well, actually, believe it or not, Pantera was one of the first real concerts I went to.
Okay.
I seen White Zombie, Megadeth, and Pantera together.
Wow, what a lineup, huh?
And that was, I think, on their, I think it was just after their second record came out.
Okay,
I think so.
And so by that time, Phil Anselmo was in the band, because there's really two eras of Pantera. I mean, probably for most people listening to this, like you and me, I came into Pantera when Phil Anselmo was in the band, and at that point, people, even today, all these years later, when people hear the name Pantera right away, they're like, Pantera's metal, and they're full blown on metal. But if you go back to the very early days of Pantera, they were, especially the ABBOTT Brothers, they were influenced by everything from Kiss to Van Halen, and the very first record, if you look at photos of the guys, I mean, they had a different singer than Phil Anselmo, and there's almost a glam look, a glam element to that very first Pantera album, and then we see how they progressed much into more of a metal band.
Yeah, right. Yep. But I never knew them. Me personally, I never knew the glam band Pantera.
You discovered that later on,
just
as
a metal band Pantera. Yeah. Cowboys from Hell album came out, and I was just blown away. So I think a lot of people were. That was a whole new sound, a whole new genre.
I mean,
Pantera is really one of those bands that kind of broke the mold. I mean, they came out with just this heavy groove that was non-existent.
Oh yeah, they called it
in metal and in music, and they really paved their own way and had their own identifiable sound.
I mean, they I remember even in doing research for us tonight, get on the Wikipedia, and it was saying they were calling it groove metal at the time, and probably the only other band that kind of predates that had that kind of similar sound would be early Black Sabbath with Ozzy Osbourne, and Pantera was often compared to Sabbath because they had kind of that gloom and doom vibe. But interestingly enough, Pantera is one of those bands that very much like Priest and Sabbath, but I'd say more like Priest. They proudly would call themselves the defenders of metal. I mean they wear that on their sleeves so proudly. We're here to we're all metal, nothing but metal.
Right.
And it's really interesting because again their influences are so varied, and while people were constantly comparing them to Metallica and let's say even Black Sabbath, I would say that Pantera is a lot more heavier than Metallica. But the interesting thing about Pantera is while they're definitely metal, like you said, at the time when they were first coming out, and even after Phil Anselmo joined the band, I mean, nobody was really saying Pantera was a Sabbath copy band. In fact, like you said, it was a very different sound, and that's hard to do. Pantera was one of those bands that they really had an original sound. They weren't trying to sound like every metal band out there, and that's, I think, why they've had the legacy they've had.
Yep, absolutely, and just a phenomenal bunch of guys and talent in that band was just off the charts,
Yeah, and do you have I'm sure we all do, but what's probably your favorite Pantera album, if you can even pick one?
You know what? With Pantera, it's kind of weird for me, man, because I like almost all of it.
Yeah.
When they started doing this, the Great Southern Trendkill and some of that kind of stuff, they lost me a little bit because I think the songwriting just went out the window, and to me, it just sounded like they just tried to go as crazy as they could, and it was just sound. It was just as much noise and racket is possible in following a song. And I know it's probably not cool to diss Pantera.
No.
A tribute show to Pantera, but I'm just being real.
Yeah.
And to me, they threw songwriting out the window on that whole record.
Now, how much of that?
And I was kind of disappointed in that. So there's some stuff that I'm not really a big fan of.
Okay.
But Cowboys from Hell and all the other stuff that they did, Far Beyond Driven, that record's awesome. Reinventing the Steel, that's awesome. I mean, they've got just a lot of good stuff, and I highly respect them and the band that they are, and the reputation that they have and that they developed. There's a reason for it,
Yeah, in fact, the Great Southern Trendkill.
Yeah.
The Great Southern Trendkill. It's interesting you mentioned that album because that's kind of when Pantera started to fall apart. There started to be a lot of friction between the brothers and Phil Anselmo. I mean, he was heavily into drugs and he was kind of doing his thing, and he really wasn't cooperating with the guys. So, you had that, and in fact, it really eventually got to a point where, the band kind of finally went their separate ways, and they were hoping to get back together, but it just never really panned out, and
right.
And it's kind of sad. But then Reinventing the Steel, like I was discussing with you in last few weeks when we were setting this up tonight, is that Reinventing the Steel, that's like the final Pantera album, interestingly enough, and they just put out like an 20th anniversary edition, and it's kind of interesting that, okay, that's the final Pantera album, and that right there is an interesting topic because as we sit here tonight, we're doing this December 8th, 2020, which marks the 16th anniversary since Dimebag Darrell's death, and we'll get into that a little later. But so we're also coming up on this is the 20th anniversary of their final album, and what a final statement that was, huh?
Oh yeah. I mean,
if that's what you're going to go out on,
they went out on a high note, man. I mean, for sure.
Yeah.
They had some really good stuff out there, and great band, and
what else can you?
I mean, nobody ever sounds like them. I mean, that's the thing. I mean, you got bands that probably tried to copy them, and and jump on the bandwagon because Pantera was the latest greatest thing, and you'll always have that, with whatever strikes hot, But they had that magic, and live they did too. I mean, they were awesome live.
And Pantera, I dare say there really hasn't been a band of that magnitude since. I mean, you can cite like Metallica and Megadeth. All these bands are kind of they were here pre Pantera, but all these years later, people still talk about Pantera, and I mean, even looking back on Dimebag Darrell, 16 years after his death, I mean, people are still just as much into Pantera as ever, and it's just amazing, Yeah, and what gets me about talking a little bit about Dimebag Darrell's death is, I mean, I really got to take it to the next step and say, really, this is the anniversary of his murder. I mean, the guy was murdered on stage, Joe. I mean, talk about that as a performer yourself. I mean,
terrible,
have you ever had? I mean, I know you've never been shot, obviously, but have you ever had any close calls where, like, maybe a fan was, trying to jump on stage with you or something like that?
Nothing to the magnitude
of that. Yeah.
Yeah, being killed or hospitalized even. I mean, the closest we had a bunch of fans from a show we did up in northern Arizona on an Indian reservation, and they rushed the stage. They were knocking shit over.
Wow.
But it was in a good way.
I mean,
Nobody got hurt. They weren't trying to hurt us. They just loved it. And it was one of my fondest memories playing live. That people were that excited. It was like they treated us like we were the Beatles. It was the weirdest experience and the coolest experience
at the same time
of my career as a musician.
Yeah. And
it was neat. It was crazy.
Yeah, and see, I can just imagine because I'm not a musician myself, but I can just imagine from the fans that were there that night, from that perspective, I could just imagine, what I'd be feeling 16 years, forget about 16 years later, but just a night it happened. I mean, you go to a rock concert to have a good time. You want to go see your favorite band, and the band at the time was not Pantera. It was Damage Plan. It was a new band with Dime and his brother Vinny and these other guys. But you go.
Yeah, Patrick Lockman.
Yeah, from Halford and Diesel Machine. But I tell you, you go with the intent of you're going to just go see your favorite band and have a good time, and then you go and you got that memory for the rest of your life. I mean, could you imagine that the night it happens? I mean, your hero is shot dead on right before your eyes, and then and I'm sure it's much easier for you, Joe, being a musician that's been on stage. Could you imagine if you'd seen one of your bandmates gunned down, let alone your kid brother?
Something that those guys, that's a nightmare that those guys probably relive on a regular basis, and they'll never be able to forget that. You know?
And then and then there's a I don't even want to there's no point to even bring up the killer's name because I have no. I mean, the guy's dead as he should be. He was he got what he deserved in my opinion. But then you got the fact that people say, which guys like that, they look up to other serial killers, and then there's the fact that Dimebag Darrell was killed on the same day that John Lennon was killed all those years ago on December 8th, and maybe that has something to do with this nut job going and killing Dimebag Darrell, which it really has nothing to do with the fact, but
right.
There's that little kind of coincidence, and it's like, wow.
Yeah, that is pretty profound. Yeah, very much so.
And, I mean, in fact, I remember years ago seeing Barbara Walters interviewing the guy that killed John Lennon, and the guy was such a nut job that he told Barbara Walters, when she asked, why did you kill John Lennon? He's like, well, let me tell you something. I was the biggest nobody before I killed John Lennon, but killing him made me the biggest somebody. I mean, that was this guy's mentality.
Claim to fame.
Yeah. And could you imagine being interviewed by Barbara Walters? The crazy mindset that puts a guy like that in.
Yeah, that's nuts.
Yeah. And but we got all this great music, and it's kind of interesting, like I said, to find out that that the ABBOTT Brothers were so influenced by Van Halen, because the ABBOTT Brothers have kind of a similar story as the Van Halen brothers. I mean, they played all their life with each other, and then it's a little different in that Vinny sees his kid brother get murdered on stage right before his eyes, and he's got to live with that kind of nightmare. But then the rest of his life, I mean, he kind of carried on, and he went on, had a career of his own, but it was never the same. And he always, people would always ask about missing his brother, and he died young too, and for different reasons. But I kind of think missing his brother and that it kind of led to him making some unhealthy choices. Who knows? But a very, very sad turn of events. 2 years ago, Vinny died.
Absolutely, yeah. We lost a great metal combination there with those two brothers.
Yeah, and see, as much as and you got to give credit for the other two guys. I mean, Phil and Rex. They were Pantera just as much for ABBOTT Brothers. But let's be honest. I mean, I think they could eventually go and do a tribute show. Maybe even there's been talk of having Zakk Wylde fill in. But even Zakk Wylde knows he's not Dimebag Darrell, and I think they could do like a special tribute show. But I don't even think that Rex or Phil would want to even do a semi-Pantera reunion without the brothers. It just would not be the same, and people would maybe see it as, oh, you're trying to cash in on their death, even though you think maybe they have some right to go on and do it. It just would not be the same, I don't think.
Right.
Yeah.
No, it wouldn't be, and and honestly, I hope that they don't
do
something like that.
Yeah.
But it seems like a lot of bands do. A lot of bands do end up putting things together like that, and the cash cow continues. And that's, sadly, that's, it's easy for us to sit here
and say that,
to say that, but this is what these guys do for a living.
Yeah.
They don't put on a tool belt and go to work like I do, or work in an office or whatever. This is how they made their livings. This is the career that they established.
Yeah.
They can't just stop and
Yeah.
in their 30s, 40s, 50s, just turn around and find something else to do. And I mean, they're career musicians. That's what they do. Some things that you don't know, the fans don't know. They may be contractually bound to certain things.
Yeah.
So some of these bands and some of these people may have done some of the things that they did because they had to.
Yeah. I mean, like for example, a good example of that might be, like I mentioned, the fact that they just put out a 20th anniversary of Reinventing the Steel, and that's a milestone in itself. And maybe if the guys were still alive, they do it anyways. I almost bet, like you said, it's a record company thing. Like, kind of, they want to kind of cash in on that, and like, hey, it's an anniversary. Let's not forget it. And at the same time, I have all the respect in the world for, like, Phil Anselmo and Rex, because Rex has put out a solo album, and he's been in Down, and Phil has the band Down. He's got, like, a ton of other projects that he does. So, but probably outside of Pantera, Phil Anselmo is probably most known for Down, and he's been able to kind of build a legacy on that as well. So that's kind of interesting that he's been able to do that.
Right.
But at the same time, we're sitting here and talking about these guys because they were in Pantera, and no matter if Phil Anselmo puts out the best-selling Down album, next time he comes out with a Down album, when people hear his name or Rex Brown, first thing they think of is Pantera,
Right.
And so, you can understand why they've got that, like you said, this is their life's work, this is their legacy. This is what people, basically know these guys from. And I know when Vinnie Paul was still alive, for several years, Phil Anselmo was trying to encourage him to, hey, let's get back together. But Vinnie just had that attitude, which you could understand, like you said, when he's played with his brother all his life. He couldn't even imagine playing with anybody else. Could you imagine seeing somebody else, playing his guitar parts? Like, no, I just don't see it.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
And
I mean, I believe Vinny went on and
had his own
in some incarnations of band Hell Yeah.
Oh yeah.
I think he did a few records with that band, and they had some good music as well. But I mean, I wasn't per se a fan of that so much, but I really did like Damage Plan. I thought that was a great debut by those guys. That was killer.
And see,
I might have even liked that more than Pantera, actually.
Yeah,
and that was just a smashing debut. I thought, man, this is going to be really promising for these guys. And then bam, all of a sudden,
and see again,
Dimebag was shot on stage.
Yeah, see again, because like I guess there's a certain it would have made a certain level of sense to say, okay, well, we're just gonna carry on, but I mean that it just would not have made sense because like you said, Damage Plan had so much potential. They just put out their second album, and so their legacy is really those two CDs they put out, and who knows if they have unreleased material. Maybe one day it'll come out, but I could kind of see, like, the guys kind of think, well, hey, we just got to call it a day, because nobody wants Damage Plan without, Dimebag. And could you imagine if they were to even consider carrying that on, the guy that would replace Dimebag Darrell, I mean, could you imagine him, you think Jakey Lee went through a lot of shit replacing Randy Rhoads, could you just imagine,
Right.
Like, who do you think you are? You're not Darrell.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Just going back for a quick throwback before, a lot, like you mentioned, a lot of people weren't aware that Pantera put out 3 or 4 records before Cowboys from Hell. Cowboys from Hell was not their first record.
Yeah, it's just the one that kind of broke through.
They went through multiple lineup changes, and through one of those lineup changes, a friend of mine, Rick Mathiasen, who was the voice of Steel Prophet for a short time, was the singer of Pantera.
Oh wow, that's interesting. Wow.
Yeah. He never put out anything with them or anything like that. Didn't really see eye to eye with them on multiple things, and wasn't in the band very long. But needless to say, he was in the band before Phil Anselmo.
Yeah, and this year is interesting. I got the idea of doing the tribute show we're doing tonight, Joe, because obviously, this date comes up every year, December 8th, and it's the anniversary of Dimebag's death. But I did not realize until wow, 16 years. I got online and I was looking up a date. And the thing is, the guy was prime of his life, 38 years old. And the interesting thing is their father is this guy, Jerry Abbott. He's a musician, I guess, but like more of a country singer. And he had a little bit of career of his own, and that's kind of like, I guess, so they kind of grew up in a musical family. But just think about that poor guy for a minute. He lost both his sons. Yeah. And I guess they're buried, in Texas, where Pantera was from, and that was really the band's home base for many years, and they used to have a club, and all the members of Pantera and Zakk Wylde, they used to hang out together, and their reputation was really like being a wild party band, and especially with two brothers, they drank really heavily, and you would have thought maybe that they would have died young, being such heavy drinkers. I don't really think they did any heavy drugs, but you could say what you want, but they lived their life. They died young, they lived fast, but it wasn't the booze that killed them, unfortunately,
Right.
They really lived the rock and roll life. And again, Dime died when he was like 38 years old, but look at how much he got into that little tiny bit of life he had,
He sure did. He lived 1,000 lifetimes compared to some people, man, and Vinny did as well.
Yeah.
They were. If you ever watch any of the DVDs, the home videos and stuff that they got out, they're hilarious. They're entertaining to watch, and
they were
just being around those guys. It would have been such a blast.
They were more entertainers.
They're so full of life and so damn funny. They were so hilarious.
And
they were always clowning around.
Yeah, see, that's the thing. They were, and that's why I think when the name Pantera comes up, they think of Vinny and Dime right away because they were such characters. In that sense alone, you could see how they were influenced by a band like Kiss, which I know they heavily were. And Ace Frehley, the Kiss guitar player, he was one of the guys that really influenced them. And I know they knew Ace, and they made appearances with him. And so much to the point, I think that Dimebag Darrell even had an Ace Frehley tattoo.
Right.
And it's interesting because both Vinny and Dimebag, when they died, they were both they knew the Kiss guys, and Gene and Paul donated a casket for each of these guys when they died to the family. And as we mentioned, Dimebag was such a Van Halen fan. In addition to being buried in the Kiss casket, Eddie Van Halen gave him that yellow striped guitar that's on the back cover of Van Halen 2, and he was buried with that as well. Think about that.
Right.
In a Kiss casket when you got the guitar of probably your ultimate guitar hero.
That'd be pretty awesome.
Yeah, and that just talks about kind of the respect these other musicians had for a guy. Even I heard even Jerry Cantrell, the guitar player from Alice in Chains, he respected the guy so much. He got invited to the funeral. So all these guys, they weren't just metal guys, but all these guys were fans of Pantera,
Right.
But I just think it's amazing that so much time has passed, especially since Dime's death, and I think it just kind of solidifies how important Pantera was to the metal community,
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. What a profound band and sound, and what a footprint those guys left. And, I'm not sure that you can say that there's too many other people that have defined a whole genre of music the way that these guys did.
Oh yeah.
There's very few people that you can really truly say that about, and Pantera is definitely one of them.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting that they've had that kind of. Even while we're sitting here talking about Pantera and Damage Plan and all these other bands that the guys are involved with. I remember shortly after Diamond died, they started having all these, like every year they put on this thing called Dime Bash, and you get all these like bands that kind of were influenced by Pantera, kind of maybe had a Pantera influence to their sound. They would put like together, this music festival, and it was usually involve, Rita Haney, who was Dime's girlfriend. She would get together all these bands and kind of as a tribute. And they've been doing it off and on. I don't think they did it this year because of COVID lockdowns and stuff. But up until this year, they've been doing it every year. And then every so often, they put out like, like any musician, I'm sure he had a ton of unreleased stuff. And they put together these compilations, call them like Dime Vision or Dime Bash. And so that stuff's out there as well for the diehard fans.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, anybody that hasn't seen some of the video footage, since you can't see Pantera live anymore, definitely check some of it out. And they're a pretty awesome experience to have seen those guys live. And like I said, the home video stuffs and the DVDs they have out and they're available are hilarious. They were great entertainers. I mean, they really were.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting. Like even Rita Haney, the girlfriend of Dime, I know. Like for many years, like Vinnie Paul, she had a lot of ill will towards Phil and Selma. From what I understand, though, that they've made up, and she even tried to get Vinnie Paul to kind of make up with Phil, but I don't think that ever happened. But again. I think what it really stemmed from was not just his heavy, that they blamed, especially Vinny blamed Phil and Selma for the breakup of Pantera. But I remember when Damage Plan was kind of just getting off the ground. Phil, I guess, was still having the drug addiction, and he was bad mouthing the guys in the press, and this tape leak where he said something about wishing Dimebag, dead, of course. Something stupid he said, which I've heard him talk since about. Says, of course he regrets saying that, and it was, when it was said supposedly when he was under the influence of drugs, and then so he's got to live with that. But then, could you imagine again? You see your kid brother murdered on stage, and then you read somebody saying something like that after the fact. That's gonna mess with your mind,
Absolutely.
Yeah. So. But they were a great band, and I think that's why at the end of the day, we've got now Rex Brown and Phil and Selma to kind of carry on the legacy, which is, anytime you want to talk about anything Pantera related, those are the guys you're going to talk to, because the other two are no longer here. But I think even Phil and Selma, like, ever since Dimebag died, he always tried to reach out to Vinnie Paul, and he kind of said, I don't want to lose another brother. I remember him saying once in the press to Vinnie Paul, and I think, of course, when you go through stuff like this, you have a different mindset. Maybe 20 years, well, in this case, like 16 years after the fact, and you're like, wow, we've been through some ups and downs, but look at what we created together. Yeah, and so I think that's the thing, and again, as we look here back on December 8th, it really is kind of interesting, because you have the fact that Dimebag Darrell's been dead. Now this is the 16th anniversary, and 40 years ago on the same day, John Lennon died. Just think about that, and you can think about either of these iconic musicians that died on December 8th, but just think of all the music that we might have if these guys had not been killed.
Right. Oh yeah, I often think of that with a lot of musicians. What would guitar be like even if guys like Jimi Hendrix and Randy Rhoads would have lived longer?
Oh yeah, and
I can only imagine.
Like Randy Rhoads, really amazes me the legacy the guy had. Only because I heard some of that stuff. Like he did those 2 albums with Quiet Riot that never got released here. And that's some pretty interesting stuff. Sounds nothing like what he did with Ozzy, but he's classically trained musician. And then the thing is, Randy only has really those 2 Ozzy albums, but man, look at the influence he had with just 2 albums.
Oh yeah, just Yeah, literally a whole legacy. Yeah.
Yeah, and like Dimebag Darrell and Vinnie Paul, they got a nice little legacy. And even Vinnie, I think, a little more so because, of course, he lived a few years longer in Diamond. Like you said, besides Pantera and Damage Plan, he also had all those great Hell Yeah albums. And I think that's maybe why he was able to go on and do that for the last several years of his life because, again, it wasn't Pantera, it wasn't Damage Plan, it was something totally separate. It had nothing to do with his kid brother, had passed on way too young, but it was like a super group, and he was just part of that super group, and that's kind of, that was his final hurrah, I guess you could say.
Right.
Yeah, and again, from what I understand, Hell Yes kind of, they've decided to carry on, obviously, and I forget who the new drummer is, but they got some guy, but see again, just think about that poor guy that's, replacing Vinnie Paul. I mean, he's going to have those
shoes.
Yeah,
that's a pretty big shoes to fill.
Yeah. But anyways, you can think of you want to say about these guys, Joe?
Well, like I said, I think everybody in the whole world knows who they are.
Yeah.
For some reason, you've been living under a rock. You should definitely check out some of the stuff they did. And personally, like I said, some of my favorite stuff was the Damage Plan stuff. I was really impressed with that record, the sound, the production, the songwriting. It was just, it was the total package, in my opinion. And I was looking forward to hearing what they did, in the future. And it's sad that it was short-lived because some asshole had to
definitely
shoot Dimebag Darrell.
And I guess we could.
Peace, Dimebag.
I guess we'll end on this too, Joe. Is I'm kind of surprised at this point. I guess give him a few more years. I would think at some point, especially maybe when you get to the 20-year mark, his death in a few years, I'm really surprised nobody has really thought of making a documentary on Pantera or, even just the shooting that night because, I mean, the shooting alone is, it goes so much more beyond music. I mean, it really is a historical event, and it's not just the fact that it's 16 years after the guy's death, but it's the fact, like I said, that he was gunned down on stage, and like I remember seeing Scott Ian from Anthrax do an interview, and he was talking about, the thing is, he goes, nothing like that has ever happened before or since that, and thank God they had the security they did, because just think if that guy would have killed other people, or
right.
And
well, he did kill some other people and injured some other people on Pantera's road.
Road
crew and stuff that ended up getting shot and hurt and killed.
Thanks for refreshing, because that's the whole thing too. Is obviously Dimebag is a famous musician that got gunned down on stage, but those other people that got killed on the crew, I mean, they were somebody's sons, or they had family members too, and they're kind of the forgotten ones. But that's what I'm saying. And could you imagine I hate to get political, but could you imagine if if the political thing being the way it is today, if that had happened, and the police are told to stand down, just let the guy. It's just crazy, but it just amazes me. Nothing like that, thank God, has happened since, and let's hope it never does.
Exactly. Yeah. Phenomenal band, phenomenal music and sound, and the whole world was blessed for having a band like that around. I mean, it was. I think it was well needed. It kind of put like a whole new soul into metal, and. I personally liked that. The groove that they had was just awesome. It was just infectious. And very, very influential to a lot of musicians and a lot of bands out there. Yeah. They definitely were.
And I think let's be honest, I think, when Darrell died, I think part of Vinnie died too. I mean, like you're saying, if you see those videos, how they always would be together and, joking around and stuff. Well, it's like he lost his better half. He had that was his best friend. I very much kind of like, I was saying, I kind of think what Alex Van Halen must be going through right now. I mean, not only did he lose his kid brother, but that's the guy he played on stage with, for his whole entire life. And I could imagine, man, just the idea that you're going to even, entertain the idea of replacing Eddie Van Halen. I just don't think so,
No, of course not.
Yeah.
Yep. Just to give a quick rundown, a lot of people don't know this. Pantera's albums are as follows. Metal Magic was their first record in 1983.
Okay.
Projects in the Jungle, 1984.
Wow.
I Am the Night, 1985. And Power Metal, 1988. And then Cowboys from Hell, of course, in 1990. Vulgar Display of Power, 1992. Far Beyond Driven, 94. The Great Southern Trendkill, 96. And then Reinventing the Steel in 2000.
Wow, you just educated me there, Joe, because probably the first of those albums I heard of probably would be Power Metal. The previous three I never heard of, so I'm going to have to try to check those out just to kind of want to hear what that sounded like.
Sure.
Yeah, and
yep.
and it's kind of interesting too because Pantera, it's just one of those bands I don't think you're ever going to see another band like that. You're going to see maybe like bands trying to clone that or trying to be that, but you'll never be what Pantera was.
Yeah, their dad, Jerry Abbott, produced some of those records on their own independent Metal Magic Records label. So it might be tough to find, but you might be able to find songs and stuff from it online or on YouTube or something like that. If you Google search it, I'm sure some stuff will pop up probably.
Yeah, and again, I think, that would be kind of interesting, like if they were to kind of re-release that stuff. But again, because maybe it's owned and operated by the family, if they were to ever do anything with it, I think you'd have a greater chance that they're not just putting it out for maybe to cash in, but rather just kind of for people to check out. But if they were going to do kind of any special release like that, I think they would maybe do a much better job at kind of putting out a better package and just kind of trying to cash in,
Right.
Yeah. Right. Well, let me ask you finally, Joe. So you mentioned seeing the band very early on in their career, and you said you saw them with Rob Zombie and who else?
Megadeth.
Wow. So what do you remember from that concert? I mean, I'm taking that was your first live experience of seeing them.
Yeah. I thought that all of the bands were really impressive and phenomenal. The vocal style of Pantera is really difficult, so I don't want to dig on Phil too much.
No.
I mean, he was having a really difficult time vocally, but the band was just so phenomenal. It was one of those experiences I'll never forget.
Yeah. And I'd seen the documentary they did for VH1 called Behind the Music, and they were talking basically. And see, here's the thing. At that time, I think he was very heavily into drugs. He claimed that he suffered from a lot of back pain and he got addicted to painkillers. Maybe he did, maybe he didn't. I don't know, but
Sure.
that affected his performing, from what I understand. And
well, it's that, and it's just a really destructive, very difficult vocal style to sing like that night after night. And there's a lot of bands that do it, but they're not out there like Pantera on tour doing it 5 nights a week.
Yeah, I mean, even
that takes its toll on you. Even a healthy vocal style, that's very difficult and very demanding.
I mean, even Ozzy Osbourne
does his vocal style. It's 10 times worse.
I mean, even Ozzy Osbourne when he does a live performance, he's not really screaming out all those heavy notes like that. I mean, he's got everything from Over the Mountain and Flying High Again to Mama, I'm Coming Home. So he has some of those ballads, and he gets to kind of slow down a little bit. Yeah, see, that's the thing about a band like Pantera. I mean, Pantera did not have any power ballads, okay? So, he's up there screaming all night.
Right, Cemetery Gates is as close as they got.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and that's the other thing I will say about Pantera. They kept it going for as long as they could, but, I think when they realized that Phil was heavily into drugs and he wasn't going to come out of his addiction for maybe, they were... That's why we finally formed, Damage Plan. Okay, we waited long enough. We're gonna do something else now. And at least they went out, like you said, on a high note. I mean, it's hard. it's hard to believe it. It's 20 years since we got the very final Pantera album, Reinventing the Steel. But what a great way to go out.
Right. Yep, I agree.
And it's kind of like Frank Sinatra. I have nothing to do with Frank Sinatra, but how he sang the song My Way. They did it their way. They went out the way they wanted, and they didn't break up for any other reason. Their albums didn't even stop selling. And it's interesting. Like all these years later, the albums are still selling. People are still buying Pantera music. I think probably the sales probably gone up even more. Sadly, since Vinny and Dime have died, and I say that because even like with Van Halen, the day Van Halen died, I mean the Van Halen record sales went up 600%, if you can believe that.
Yeah. Yeah, sadly I've heard that said a lot, that when somebody dies that they're
all of a sudden
for a brief time at least there's a peak sales.
I mean, all of a sudden, see that's the thing. All of a sudden a ton of people that weren't maybe as diehard Pantera fans they're now buying everything Pantera related, but that's just the nature of a beast, as they say. And and I say like Pantera is one of those bands, Joe. Like there's a handful of them. There's like Iron Maiden, Judas Priest, Black Sabbath. These bands these metal bands that like they come along and they really put their footprint in the metal community. And see, Iron Maiden, it's amazing because all these years later, they put out a new album and it sells. It becomes an instant hit. I mean, their fame is worldwide. Same thing.
Oh, absolutely.
All these other bands. Judas Priest, we're going to be talking about in the next episode for our 50 years of Priest special. We're going to have a lot to talk about, but I mean, that right there, 50 years strong. That's kind of says it all. And
that's a testament. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, Joe, I want to thank you taking time to do this special Pantera tribute and remembering Dimebag Darrell Abbott on the 16th anniversary of his death. And I didn't want to make this a sad event, although how could it not be? But rather look back and on the legacy of Pantera with nothing but love. Let's make it a celebration.
Their life.
Yeah.
And the way that they live by listening to their music and buying their music, man.
That's right. Well, thanks again, Joe, and we'll be talking next week. Take care, my friend. Bye-bye.
You too. Take care.